Looks like we're about at that time and people will be coming in as the presentation is going, and so they might miss the beginning, but that's fine. So welcome for the almost end of the ChatGPT and AI discussion going on here. Like we were just talking about how many presentations there's been on this very topic, and I've been to as many of them as I could get to, and I'm learning all sorts of things that I didn't know. So it's been a very good experience. So hopefully this isn't redundant for a lot of you guys, but maybe you've come with all the questions that have come up from the other things. So welcome to the presentation. What can AI do and how can I use it? I am Aaron Bauer. I'm an instructional designer at Colorado State University, and I'll let you introduce yourself, guys.
I'm Jesse Thompson. I'm a course developer at Colorado State University. We both work for the learning development team for CSU Online.
So as instructional designers and course developers, we're going to start with objectives because I want you guys to know what we're going to be covering, and hopefully this is going to be matching your expectations from description. So we're going to talk about the current capabilities and limitations of AI tools, because this is a very quickly developing field. There's a lot going on. I mean, just this last week, ChatGPT 4 was released, and there's all sorts of new capabilities going on there, which you've probably heard about from the other presentations if you've been there. But we're going to be talking about what's going on right now and giving some examples and tools so you can use it and feel more comfortable with it if you haven't ever even opened up that site before, registered, or used any type of AI, generative AI things. So we're also going to discuss questions or concerns regarding the effects of AI in education. So mainly to calm fears that the sky isn't falling and education will exist for at least a little bit longer. At least this isn't going to destroy it. So our education system. We're also going to come up, produce and share some options for using AI tools in your classroom and your development. So we really wanted this to be a very practical presentation of, say, you've never used AI before, you don't really know what it is, this type of large language learning module things, and you want to use it in your classroom. This is how you're going to do it. So you'll have just kind of a step-by-step, here's what I can do to create an assignment or an activity that will use this for the betterment of my students. So let's start with what is ChatGPT. So it's not the only one of these large language model things out there. There's a bunch of others. But it's the kind of foremost and it's the most sophisticated right now. And so it's the one that people are talking about the most. It's been trained. So what that means is it's just looked over a lot of information on the web and it's just sucked it all in, and it kind of just knows it. It has this big brain of information, but it's not really wise about how it does it and how it uses it. But, you know, like books, webs, Wikipedia, it knows all of Wikipedia, those type of things. It doesn't really do up-to-date information super well. So everything in there is going to be a little dated. If an event happens that's a big event, it's not going to, you can't really go in there and ask about it right away. You could actually provide it some information and then it could look at that and then try and interpret it, but it's not going to know what's going on in current events. Most of these tools currently can be thought of uncharitably as just like fancy autocomplete. Like when you're writing an email and it suggests how you finish this sentence and you can hit tab and it just finishes the sentence for you. It's like that, but a lot bit more in there. Yeah, more charitably, you can think of it as an automated conversationalist. So these things really were just like developed to be chatbots in a way. Like you're interacting with them, they remember what you're saying to a certain extent, and then can give you information. And honestly, it's going to tell you what it thinks you want to hear most of the time, which can be good because that's what it's designed to do, make people, happy, make people want to use it more. But that's also dangerous because telling people only what they want to hear is a good way to fuel biases and other problematic behaviors. So it does write originally. So it's coming up with its own words, its own way of saying, which is, I think, the biggest fear for a lot of people in higher education, because then it's a cheat bot, it's plagiarism. Like, well, it's plagiarism, but it's not really plagiarism because it's not somebody else's words. It's the thing, it gets into this moral gray area, I suppose. I mean, it's cheating, yeah, but it can be used for a lot more than just that. And it's not really designed to do that. It's designed for other things. And we'll go into that more later in the presentation. It can also generate text in virtually every human language, as well as most programming languages. So it can program things. It's pretty good at writing little programs and things like that that are basic. It remembers previous aspects of single conversations. It also, ChatGPT-3, I can't remember exactly how many, but it remembers like 500 words or something. It doesn't really remember a lot. And as soon as you start another conversation, it doesn't remember what happened in the previous conversation. And the newer stuff gets better at that. It can also synthesize information into summaries and overviews. So you like give it an article, say, hey, what can you summarize this for me? It reads it, tells you the high points in there. So moving on now. Hand it over to Jesse.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. So looking at kind of what ChatGPT is not, right? So we've talked about the capacities. Let's talk a little bit about the limitations. So I realize this first one is a bit of a, maybe a bit of a hot take, kind of a controversial claim, but it's really not any more of a cheating machine than modern search engines are, right? It is not really designed for those purposes. It can generate language that is not previously existing on the internet. So I think that is the concern for a lot of people, that it can produce writing that will not be detected by Turnitin, although I believe Turnitin just recently released a component of their plagiarism detection that does try and identify AI written text. There are problems with that as well that maybe we can get into later, but it doesn't exactly revolutionize the capacity for cheating. It is really limited in what it can do mathematically. This is a language model, and so the mathematical capacities it has are limited to the language it is consumed, right? So if you ask it, what's 4 plus 4? It's going to pretty consistently give you the correct answer because there's a fair amount of language out there on that particular mathematical function. But if you ask it even a simple operation, subtraction, addition with, say, 4 digits, 4,336 minus 2,177, it really struggles with that because it was not trained on mathematical data. It was trained on linguistic data, and there's just not as much linguistic data on even basic functions like subtraction and addition with that many digits. So it is not much of a mathematical tool. And like Aaron mentioned, well, it can synthesize information. It can that is what it's designed to do. It can take large amounts of text and language and synthesize them into sort of filter it out and organize it for you. It really doesn't analyze. It is not really capable of producing its own critical analysis, right? We're going to look at a slide here in a second that really highlights that. And yeah, what about word problems? It depends on the kind of word problem, right? So like if it is a word problem that it will have a better shot at dealing with a word problem if that word problem was already present to some degree in the language it was trained on, right? So if you present it with a word problem that requires it to do reasoning, all it's going to be capable of is identifying the patterns that it can find in that language and giving you its best guess of what the answer is going to be. So the degree to which it requires it to do reasoning, it's going to struggle with that. Good question, though. It is not connected, like Aaron mentioned. It has trouble. It does not have up-to-date information. Now, the recent integration with Microsoft's Bing search engine is designed to give it connection to current events. But if you went to, if you were using ChatGPT 3, for example, I asked it about the war in Ukraine. Well, the information it gave me, because it was trained on linguistic data from up till about 2021, I believe, the response it gave me had to do with the invasion of the Crimean Peninsula back in 2014, because it did not have access. It was not trained on anything telling it about anything going on recently. So it's important to be aware of sort of, what version and sort of what connections this thing has to sort of be able to put a human check on what kind of information it's providing you. And it is not any sort of artificial general intelligence or AGI, right? There's a whole lot of talk. Aaron and I really wanted to kind of keep this conversation directed towards the current capacities of these technologies. It's fun and it's very easy for these conversations to turn into what will be possible, but to start talking about things like artificial general intelligence, machine consciousness. I guess I can't confidently say it's nowhere near that, but ChatGPT is not currently that. It does not have its own creative capacities. It does not have its own intellectual insights. It does not have, some of the other qualities of human consciousness. So I think those are some important sort of limitations of the current state of the technology to identify. Move on to the next slide there. Cool. So yeah, there are gonna be a couple points where we ask for sort of some input, either in the form of jumping on the mic and asking a question or putting something in the chat. We've all got eyes on that, and asking any questions you might have about it. Concerns, interests in its use, and we're gonna kind of like keep moving through the presentation. We'll try to answer those questions as it goes. Helen, I see, who trains GPT? It is the training is, when we refer to training, we're talking about the data that the model is fed, I guess you could say. That it uses as sort of inputs to identify what sort of outputs it's going to create when you ask it a question, right? So the training is that these models, these neural networks are fed these large language models are fed large amounts of language, right? Which they've harvested from all these different places to train this model to respond with the correct linguistic outputs. So the training is really a process of giving the model a large
exposure.
enough. Yes, exposure, exactly. And there are other mechanisms that are used to sort of shape the model. It's called alignment in sort of AI circles. OpenAI, the company that developed ChatGPT, did use humans at various points in the process to sort of try and sculpt the information that ChatGPT was being fed, and to also sort of limit places where it would go in conversations. Do you have anything to add to that, Aaron?
Yeah, and I mean, just that the people who are developing it, that are training it, are the software developers, the company that is in charge of developing the software itself. So yeah, there is some level of, we just don't know exactly how the process is going because it's behind closed doors where they're developing things. as far as I know, there's not a completely open source version of this available. So we can't really see.
Yeah, I believe Lambda, Google's large language model, did get leaked.
No.
But yeah, that is not their intention, because yeah, the mechanisms by which their models make these decisions about their outputs is their, that's how they make their money, right? That's their proprietary model. That is sort of what they're capitalizing on, so I think in a lot of cases, yeah, we don't get to see that.
Yeah, we don't get to see what goes on in the kitchen. We just get to eat the food that they bring out to the table.
Yeah. And Helene, is it a qualitative or quantitative shift for us? Would you want to hop on the mic and sort of elaborate a little bit there?
Well, is it a fundamental change? Is it fundamental, or is it just bigger, better of the same, just the next iteration of what we've seen before? Or have we really gone on a different train track here?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, there's like,
I mean, it's debatable, I think.
Yeah, there seems to be, that seems to be one of the big things that are up for debate, is like, and people seem to be on like pretty opposite ends of the spectrum with this. Like there seems to be, like, I've seen people being like, 5 years, human labor is going to be obsolete, right? I've seen people saying this is not that big a leap in technology, right? I was at the CSU colloquium on ChatGPT. There was a machine learning specialist there who kind of was of that opinion that like, this is not the crazily dramatic jump in technological capacities that it's sometimes being made out to be, right? And I can't really claim to have enough expertise in the technology itself to really be able to tell, but yeah, that's an important question.
Let's move on to some examples.
Yeah. So yeah, we wanted to show some examples of some things that we had done with ChatGPT, just to kind of give you an idea, if you've never used it before, the sorts of things that it is capable of in its current form. This first one here, we've got both the prompt and the output. So the prompt, I asked it to, the prompt I gave it was, in HTML, create a homepage for my business. I'm an educational consultant and my skills are assessment, educational technology, and critical thinking instruction. So the output that it gave me was actually in HTML, but this is the product of that output. Okay, so it was very bare bones, right? It didn't have any real design elements to it, right? But it did correctly create the headings, right? Those the headings of the welcome, about me, services, those are all correct. It did design this output is untouched. I didn't do anything to this. I just pasted it into Canvas actually, and got that output, right? It did create a sort of template for me, to a place to put my email, place to put my phone, right? Those links up at the top don't actually link to anything, right? Because it's not connected to the internet. It can't find another page to link to, but it coded this in HTML, right? And I have seen people using it to debug some of their code in languages like Python. So I just find that to be an interesting capacity of this technology that not only speaks just about every human language, but also speaks computer code, which maybe isn't that surprising. It's a computer. This next prompt, my mom was wanting to do a video about, she teaches reading. She wanted to do a video about teaching prosody. And so I was like, hey, let's see what ChatGPT does with that. So, you can see it kind of created this script, intro music and graphics, cut back to the host, right? And the content of the lesson of how to teach prosody is pretty, it's not superficial necessarily, but it kind of hits the right notes, but it's not a super complex melody, right? But it did, correctly identify the structure. It knew what I wanted. This last one is kind of the most interesting to me because it highlights some of the limitations. So the prompt I gave it was, does the following argument commit a logical fallacy? All the parts of the painting are red, therefore the whole painting is red, which that's a fairly simple thing for a human to identify, right? If all the parts of a painting are red, then yeah, the whole thing's going to be red. That's a fairly simple a piece of reasoning for a human to identify, okay? What happened with ChatGPT is that identified the structure of all the parts are X, therefore the whole is X, which is the typical structure of the fallacy of composition. So there were a couple interesting mistakes here. One, color is an exception to the fallacy of composition. If all the parts are red, the whole thing's red. Color just works that way. Most things don't, but color does work that way, right? So it saw the structure of all the parts are X, therefore the whole is X, and said, yep, fallacy, right? It also got the name of the fallacy wrong. The two fallacies, composition and division, are related. And it identified this as the fallacy of division, which is where you would say, like, the whole painting is red, therefore all the parts are red. It did that at first, and then at the end, it changed to, it says there, that last sentence, the argument commits the fallacy of division by assuming that what is true of the individual parts of the painting must be true of the entire painting. Well, now it got the form of the argument right. It at that point, it realized I'm going from parts to whole, but that's composition, not division, right? So it not only kind of screwed up a little bit of the sort of labeling of what this is, which I would think would be the sort of thing it should be good at, but it completely screwed up the reasoning, right? And this was an instance of where we're asking it needed to do some reasoning on its own, and it couldn't. All it could do was recognize the pattern, and in this case, since it didn't follow the normal pattern, it was stuck, and it identified it as a fallacy when it's not one. So yeah, the next slide, yeah, Aaron's going to talk about some more sort of instances of some differences.
So, I mean, I understand this is a little bit of a tangent, but I feel like it's good to visualize some of this for people who, that those text examples were great there, but they were kind of small. Like, here's a very clear image of what's happening. So this is actually text to image generation by Stable Diffusion and Midjourney in there. So there are other like generative AI programs here, but this is mainly taking a text, a prompt, and then trying to create something visual out of it. And when you can kind of see some similarities in the way they put stuff together. They just like making things up. They kind of make something that looks just right, but not really, like close. So on the far left of the screen, we have just the prompt, and this is Stable Diffusion. I just gave it the prompt, man playing guitar. And you can see, if you just glanced at that picture without looking closely at it, that's a man playing a guitar right there. But the closer you look at it, the weirder things get. So like there's this hand coming over the top of so he has three hands for some reason. And this one kind of like blends into the guitar somehow. The guitar actually has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 strings. Guitars only have 6 strings. And the hand looks very weird back here. And it's also just sitting in a very weird, awkward place. Somebody actually playing the guitar wouldn't be holding it. So this was done with a program called Stable Diffusion. Midjourney is a little bit more sophisticated of an image generation program, and it's the same prompt, man playing guitar. It looks better. The strings are kind of wobbly. like they're not straight like you would expect them to be. For some reason, he's on a subway track out here, and it looks like it's raining or something. He's wearing like there's a lot of stuff that's thrown in there that wasn't in the original prompt, because this is what we think somebody playing guitar would look like in there. And so the more sophisticated the prompt, you can get actually more sophisticated results. And the presentation that was just right before this was all about prompt engineering, and it was excellent. So if you didn't go to that one, go back and watch the recording, because they got a lot of really good things in there, and it's more than we're going to talk about in this. But you have to know how to ask the right question in order to get better results. It's the old software saying garbage in, garbage out. Like, you don't like the output, well, you put better input in there. So you see this last one over here, look at this prompt. Like, it's really more sophisticated. It kind of describes the situation. It gives a lot of these more technical photography terms in there. Yeah, it looks really close, right? It looks a lot better. I mean, we gave it the prompt to make it Homer Simpson as a human playing guitar, so it's going to be a little bit awkward looking for that. But if you look in the background, you can see like the text is just gibberish. And that's another thing about image generation. It'll just, like, it doesn't know how, it's working on image. It doesn't know how to put words together. Just like the large language models can't do math, the images can't do text very well. It'll just try and make something that looks generally like a word, but the letters won't spell anything really. But also, when you look closer, there's some awkward things going on with the hand. Like, this is a really large hand, and don't want to decipher it all there, but you can get the idea that this is a very similar process to what is happening when you're looking at ChatGPT and other generative AI text-based things. They're going to be giving you what it thinks you want, but it's going to make up and kind of slide things around to make it fit. So let's go to the next slide. So what we'd like to do for a little bit, if you haven't already, you can actually create an account with ChatGPT. Here's the link to it, chat.openai.com. You can link it with your Google or Microsoft account, so you don't actually have to have another password to remember. It just kind of goes in there, or you can create your own password if you're worried about that thing. And here's what you could do. You could ask the chatbot to complete a task you think your students would use it for, just to see what happens, because I feel like a lot of people, like, we have ideas about what this would look like, but when you actually start working with it, it's something a little bit different than that. If you have problems coming up with something to say, just tell me a joke, summarize this topic for me, or anything you might find interesting in response. So we're going to share this later, and we're going to continue with the presentation for a bit. But I just wanted to put this exercise out there so you could start working on it a little bit. And I actually want to take a second to look at it with you. So this is something I did just earlier today. I didn't cheat for putting the presentation together, but this is the website. This is chat.openai.com. And I asked this morning, I am giving a presentation on ChatGPT being used for educators. What would the presentation cover? And interesting enough, it covered a lot of the things that we're talking about. It, enhancing student engagement, personalized learning. One thing I didn't think about was 24/7 availability. Yeah, like you as teacher, instructor, faculty, designer, you're not available 24 hours a day. And sometimes somebody needs help with something. So this is always on there in a way that we can't be. When you start looking at it, I mean, it covers topics pretty well in there. So you could ask it to do something like this. And I mean, honestly, if I wanted to use this as a starting point, as an outline to to create a presentation, we could use that. That's one of the things that ChatGPT is specifically designed for doing this type of work. So I'm going to come back over here, go back to full screen. So if you want to work on that, if you really don't feel comfortable, I mean, we're not going to fail you, give you a bad grade for the presentation, but it'd be nice to have some examples to share later on. So in the next slide, I'm going to just give some other uses for ChatGPT that this is what it would be really good at. This is what it could be useful for educators. So copy editing, revising, brainstorming, any other form of writing. I had spent about 4 years in my undergrad and grad school working in a writing center. And freshmen, sophomore would come in with their essays, and like I would explain what a comma splice is, or how they're not using a semicolon correctly. You can't just throw it in the sentence and it makes it do what you want to. And that's the type of thing that, like, hey, is there a problem with this sentence? And it could look at it like, oh yeah, like there's a comma splice, you need a conjunction right after that. What is a conjunction? Well, here are the conjunctions. Here's a helpful acronym to remember them: fanboys, for, and anyway. So those type of things that could save somebody who, they need some help with their writing. They know they have problems with grammar, copy editing. They can't get into campus, or it's 3 a.m. and the writing center is closed, something like that. This could be a very good use for those type of things. General debugging of simple code languages, HTML, Python, JavaScript, like the example Jesse was giving earlier in there, like it's going to, it can follow those rules pretty well because those are explained. There's a lot of documentation about that on the internet, and so it took that in. It also is good at synthesizing large amounts of linguistic data down to a compact summary, summarizing things. So you don't have time to read this entire thing, but you want to know the highlights of it. This can summarize things for you. It can save you time. It can save students time if, like, they have busy lives. They want to know what's happening in this very long reading, but they don't have time to actually sit down and read it. This could summarize it for them to give them at least some tools so that they know the high points in there. Of course, accuracy, there could be some problems with that still, but it's a tool that could get, that they could use. It is also good at translating from one language to another. Of course, the same thing applies with Google Translate. You got to be careful. Some things don't exactly translate the way you expect them to, like it's a literal translation, but that's not what that word means in this context. So, but it's also a good tool to start with something. And then it's also good at stylizing writing. So you can rewrite this in the style of Ernest Hemingway, or, Stephanie Meyer, or whoever you want to be in there. So I noticed there was a lot of things going on in the chat, but I haven't looked at it. Are there any questions coming in? Oh, we're good? Okay. So moving on. Example uses in the classroom. So can you take it over, Jesse?
Yeah. And the one thing that had come up was audio, AI audio generation, which the main things that I have seen, there's definitely text to audio. I sent Christy a Severus Snape saying that she had been accepted into Hogwarts or something like that. Those definitely exist. And what's kind of particularly scary, to me at least, is there are some models that will turn live audio of you speaking into someone else's voice. So you can provide it with you can provide it with data to train itself on, right? So I've got 30 minutes of anybody speaking clearly, feed it to the AI, and I can either do text to audio generation, or there are some models that will do live translation of your audio as you're speaking into someone else's voice. One of the sort of things that comes up a lot with these technologies is the potential abuse, right? You probably don't have to think too hard to come up with some nefarious uses of that sort of technology, right? There are also some really incredible things with even text to video generation that I've been seeing lately that are kind of blowing my mind. Like, wow, I did not realize we were there yet. But yeah, there's, with sort of all the attention that this has gotten, and this has been happening for a while, right? These models are not like some brand new thing, but like there's a huge proliferation of money coming into this industry and people generating models for all sorts of things. So in the sort of we wanted to provide some example uses in the classroom, right? So like how can this help you either as a course developer, instructional designer, classroom teacher, right? So one of them that I think is pretty useful is brainstorming. Like ChatGPT is a large language model. It was designed to talk to you, right? So I mentioned this yesterday. I would always, as a high school English teacher, I'd always have problems. Students would be, I just don't know what to write about. I don't have any ideas. I can't think of what to write about. And I would always, I would love to sit down with you for the next half hour and just brainstorm with you, but I have 39 other students that I have to pay attention to and work with. And so, hey, why don't you, I know you like motocross. Tell ChatGPT, hey, I like motocross. I need to write an essay. Give me some ideas. Right? Like, and have a bit of a conversation with it. Oh, I like number 4. What can you tell me about number 4? Right? Use it to just like, an instructor would help a student sort of brainstorm and get to the point where they could write something. Potentially ChatGPT could do something similar. Providing summaries. And this is kind of a point where I think these technologies could really help with accessibility and accommodations, because like when I worked at an alternative school teaching English, I often needed mature texts at a lower Lexile level. But I really struggled to find those type of things. I struggled to find things that were at the appropriate Lexile level, but weren't childish for the high school students I was working with. I wish I would have had this so I could take text with the appropriate content level and say, adjust this for an 800 level Lexile, right? That would have been really helpful to me as a high school English teacher. Also, as on the teaching side, generating examples. When I was teaching logic at CSU, I needed to create so many examples of fallacies, right? I taught a whole unit on fallacies. I needed so many examples. Well, over like the course of 10 years, I had a huge document with all these examples, but it would have been helpful to have something like this of like, hey, I need more examples of appeal to authority. I need more examples of ad hominem. I need an example of division that uses these components, right? It was very time consuming as a classroom teacher to create all those examples myself. I think this is something that could aid with that. Yeah. So next one's yours, Aaron, I think.
I'll just give the rest of the presentation muted. Why not? That'll be good. So this is what to look out for. So bias. We've talked a lot about like how it gets information, and we don't know exactly what information, how it's getting all of this, but there's been a lot of examples of early chatbots and things just going really off the rails really quickly because of what it's being fed. There's been a lot of work to try and rein that in, but it's still going to be there. Whenever humans have biases, whatever we create will have biases too. So we need to keep an eye out for that as you're working with it, and be especially cautious about things that could potentially hurt a certain demographic. Issues of equity. So not everybody is going to have access to this. It's something you have to have, a computer, you have to have internet access, you have to keep in mind that not everybody you're working with in an online class and an in-person class will have the same access to technology. So if you're going to be using this as like a requirement or something, like think about how everybody is going to need to have access to this, and how will they access it. It might seem really simple for you to do it, but it could present a real problem for somebody who doesn't have a laptop or any computer at home to do this as a homework assignment, for example, in high school or something like that. So we've kind of talked a little bit about factually inaccurate information, but like this is one of the things that I think has been hit on a lot over the last 2 days in other presentations about how it just likes to make stuff up sometimes. Like it'll give you an answer, but the more you dig into that, it's just like these citations aren't real. Like this information that you're telling me is flat out fake. Yeah, it supports your argument, but it's not, like you're just making this stuff up. So yeah, it likes making stuff up. And so you have to be careful. And if you're using it to brainstorm, like, okay, this is great. It gave me a place to start. And now I'm going to actually start researching and realize, oh, well, this fact that it was telling me is actually wrong. And that could actually spur the student to go into another direction, something else. It could add a level of complexity to their argument that they might not have had before. And I noticed in a few of the other presentations, they really brought up how if you're going to be using this in a classroom, it's good to sit down beforehand and just have a conversation with all the students about these problems so that they know what to look out for, and they're not just kind of trusting it out of the gate there. You like, so they can be responsible users for it. Then also stay up to date, because this is changing. I'm sure some of the stuff we've said in this presentation has already been outdated because of releases that we just didn't know about yet. But you kind of have to keep, if you're using new technologies, you have to keep up and make sure that the next time somebody logs into the chat.openai.com, that it's not going to that they haven't changed the algorithm somehow in the background, that it'll give very different responses than what you had the day before, because they're upgrading all this stuff constantly. So now is the time that we had that, example thing earlier and said, hey, go open an account and try and do some things. Now's the time we can share that, or any other brainstorming things that came up, or ways to implement this. So share your thoughts. You can put them in the chat or come off mute if you'd like.
Yeah, and just any questions or thoughts you have about this stuff. Does anybody, I'm curious, does anybody see themselves legitimately using this technology for either having students use it, using it themselves? Yeah, Jessica, using to generate multiple choice questions on content. Yep, and they always have to double check them. Can you give me learning theories with examples of how to apply them? Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, we got them coming in now. Yeah. Okay. To summarize a highly technical article to communicate with people outside of education. Yeah, that's a great use of that, right? Like that's what this technology really does well. It takes language and turns it into another form. If you need I would almost say that's like one of the things this technology does better than anything. Summarizing, synthesizing, it does a fantastic job of that. If you give it the parameters and say like, hey, I've checked the information in here, it's reliable. Now take this information and summarize it, synthesize it, do something with it, right? That's a really sort of safe use of it,
I really love Maureen put in there, just trying to keep it simple, asked a joke. Why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything. Oh, that's good. Thank you, Maureen. And she goes on to talk about how it's a fun way for online instructors to start a module, like try to go and make a science joke and post it back on the discussion board or something. It supports the idea of professors at play, as well as opens up the conversations for students to talk about AI. So I've heard about professors at play before, but I don't know as much about it as some other people. Does anyone want to talk about?
Sure. Yeah, so the idea is, I would take my, there we go. Okay, here I am. The idea would be really focusing on your emotional well-being as well as the academics. And so keeping in mind that it's okay to have a bit of comic relief in your courses. It's okay to take a moment to just kind of get to know students on a personal kind of level. And so I think that, having this just, I'm going to go out here and go have it tell me a joke is kind of twofold. So you've got that comic relief, you've got that little bit of energy that you're getting in there, but also then the students that maybe are a little bit leery about it, or wondering if they're, doing it, but is it a bad thing? It can open up this conversation, maybe in a course that you wouldn't normally have that conversation. So I think it's fun to be able to have that little bit of opportunity for that.
Thank you, Maureen. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Brianna said, used ChatGPT to generate course objectives using Bloom's taxonomy, and then put in the course description. So little shortcut there. That's nice.
And you can, you can establish parameters with ChatGPT, right? You can say, I want you to act as X. I want you to do X in the form of Y. I want you to do X, but do not include, ABC, right? You can sort of shape the parameters of how you want it to function to kind of sculpt more of what it provides you. That, then we're starting to get into the territory of like, okay, this isn't as like completely labor saving as like we're maybe sometimes told it is, right? Like now you're okay, now I'm prompt engineering, right? Like now I'm having to like sculpt, okay, that wasn't quite the output I wanted. Okay, I'm going to change these parameters. All right, I'm going to change this wording a little bit. Okay, what does that get? It doesn't like it, but it's close. So I'm going to regenerate it. It's going to, I'm going to give it that input again, see what the next input looks like. Like, and you can get some good stuff, but like for a lot of simple things, right? Sometimes it's just easier it's faster to do it yourself, but you can adjust those parameters for for these models yourself through the prompts.
Yeah, and I think we're right at about time in here, but I noticed a conversation going on about using it to check works cited and references, format, and pages, and like, yeah, that could be very technical and time saving. It's just like, is this the correct citation format? Yeah, certainly. Great. So anything else anybody want to add before we sign off?
Thanks so much, everybody.
Yeah.